Hi, and welcome to Can You Explain This Docker Thing? Hey, my name is Eric, and one of the questions I've gotten the most is basically, can you explain this Docker thing? If you watch some of my videos, and I hope you do, if not, subscribe, and there are plenty more new videos coming up. Quite often I do something code-wise, and then I run it in a Docker image. So I run it in Business Central, but on a Docker image. And Docker is still a mystery, even to me sometimes. But I thought maybe we could do a video on what's this all about. And for that, I will not do my usual thing with going to Visual Studio Code. Here is my PowerShell. The prompt is looking slightly different, but we can look at that at another time. So I'm gonna run a command because I have already installed something known as the BC Container Helper, which is kind of a set of tools that will help you. Hence the name. And one of the very cool thing is a command called the new BC Container Wizard. And we all love a good wizard. So this one will open new thing here, and let me see if my zoom functionality works, because for some reason this program is rather picky with the wizard is very picky with the font size you're running in. So let's see if we can get it to work without zoom. We might not be able to. Let's actually just go ahead and make the font bigger. Freddy, if you're watching this, if I run it again with the big font, then everything blows up. But I put a GitHub issue on that. So we're working with commercial software here, so of course we need to accept the end user license agreement. We'll do that, yes. And the first question we get here is a great segue to talk about Docker images. So a Docker image is kind of, you have a program. In this case, it's actually multiple programs, but the program that we want to run is Business Central, the server. But the server is like, there's a SQL bit, and there's an IIS bit, and there's service tier and subcomponents, and there's a database and stuff like that. And the shortest possible explanation is that you take all that and put into a container, and kind of move around as one unit. So in case you need two of them, it's just two containers. It's not like it's already installed on your C drive, so you cannot install it again because it's already there, because everything is kept inside the container. More about that later. I have some slides from a presentation I did at some point, but I thought I would actually get this going because there's a bit of waiting time involved here. Anyway, so we can have our container running in two different spots. We can either have it run on our local computer, or we can have it run somewhere else. And this is Microsoft, so of course this is an Azure VM, but in reality, local or not local. So I'll just hit enter, meaning that I'll select local. Then we need to talk about authentication. So how do you authenticate into Business Central? If you have seen my videos, I always just, I type my initials and a password. So that's basically what we are asking for here. So if I do A, it will prompt me when I create the container for what's the username and password. Let's give this container name. Let's call it UT for YouTube. Then what version of BC do you want? So we have two options. two groups. Either we have a cloud sandbox or a on-prem version. The difference is that the cloud sandbox tries to behave as if you were working towards a cloud sandbox. So if your end target is a SaaS-based version of BC, then go with the cloud sandbox. If your end target is an on-prem installation, you can go with the on-prem version. I'll just do the cloud sandbox here. What we can also do is that we can actually specify specific versions. So if I do C, I could say that I would like a 16.5, and then I get a 16.5. Actually, I need to tell that I want 16.5 on 15897. You guys can't see this. I'm just typing a version .7906, and then I get that version. Let me go back because I just want the latest version. So let me go back. So now I'm just gonna, and if you press Z, then you go back, and I'll now just select A to get the latest version. So latest is selected. Next question coming up in just a moment. Come, you can do it. Come on. There you go. Is what country version do you want? And as you can see, that BC is really expanding. The list of countries just keeps expanding. Like we have India on now. It's pretty cool. I'll just go with the US version. Do you want the test toolkit to be installed? The test toolkits are basically some specific extensions that holds all the test code units. So if you're going to run either your own test or you're going to run Microsoft tests, you need test toolkits. I'm going without test toolkits right now. So I'll just go with D, no test toolkits. Do you want a premium plan? So when we're working with cloud use, the cloud version, there are basically two types of users, essential and premium. Premium are used for if you have manufacturing or service management. I'll just go without premium users now. Do you want test users? So because we're on the cloud sandbox, users are normally created not by going into the user and hit new, but are created in Office 365, and then they're synced over to BC. So if you want some test users like external accountant, premium and essential, admin, team members, and so on, you can get that. I don't care. Next question, a license file. So licenses are still a thing. So if you have a developer license, you can use that to gain access to your numbers and so on. I'll put in a license file, have located in a folder called Navision, because hey, you gotta keep some names alive, right? The next question, the database. This is actually pretty interesting. So the database, you have three options. One, use Kronos on a SQL Express sitting inside the container. You can restore a backup into the container running on the SQL Express, or you can connect to an existing database sitting somewhere else. So if you have a database that you want to connect to and so on, you can connect to that. Or if you're if you're building up a pipeline where you have a backup with your own data that you need to create the container on, you can do that. I'll just go with A. Give me some Kronos data, and we're quickly coming to the end of this, but then we need to talk about DNS. So how do the containers see the network? And I'll come back to what actually means by that when we have some wait time. I will just go with the default. In some cases, default doesn't work because corporate networks and so on. So you can ask the wizard to use Google DNS or use a primary DNS instead. I'll just go with the default because I know that works. Next question is about isolation mode, and this is the one that's hard to explain without actually talk about the stuff I want to talk about later in the video. But you can run a container in two ways. You can run it as a process or as a process inside a virtual machine. But if you're unsure, you can just let the BC container helper make the decision for you. So that's what I'm gonna do. Next question, how much memory do you want? I'll give it 8 gigabytes. 4 is fine for a demo. 4 to 8 is great for development. 16 is needed if you do base app development, but you shouldn't, so 8 is fine. So if we're going to run the same thing multiple times, we can save the image. So with that, if we already have created a container with the same components, we'll have an image and can pull that instead of pulling a new one. So I'll just ignore that for now. And now we have a script. So what we have on screen is actually the resulting script of all the selections we made. So I will save that into my YouTube folder and call it docker.ps1. And then on another screen, so let me move this up here. So now we have let's see, I think this one also supposed that we make it bigger. So now we have our script that we just created. And one question that the wizard is not asking, that, hey, again, Freddy, if you're watching this, I suggest that the include AL command is added to the script, because that's the only thing I need to add every time. Because if you want the source code for the base app extracted and so on, that's what you need. So now we have a script. Let's run it. Yeah, we need to save it first. Remember, I asked, I didn't really choose Authentication. I chose to have nav user password authentication, but I didn't provide any credentials. So running the script now, it asks me, it looks like a login screen, but it's actually asking me what should the credentials be. So it's kind of a login screen used the opposite way. Okay, so now this is running. And while that is running, let's see if I can find this guy. Oh. And something broke. So cannot find the license file. Let's see. Oh, this is because I did it without a dash. So let me actually fix this one. Let's run it again. That's a stupid bug, but that happens. So that's actually one reason it's great to save the script, because if you did something stupid like I just did, then you can have it do over it without having to run the entire wizard again. So let me try to pull up this little presentation thingy. So we'll have it up here, and hopefully we can still see that something is running. Here's the joke. What is Docker? Well, it worked on my machine, then we'll ship your machine, and that's how Docker was born. So we all know the concept of a virtual machine. Now that we have some hardware, on top of that we have a thin layer called the hypervisor that kind of controls the virtual machines, and inside each virtual machine we have an operating system, we have our application, we have everything. And so if we need to run 5 of them, we have 5 OSs and 5 everything. Very well understood concept. The great thing about this is that you do get a complete operating system. You can RDP into it and have a desktop and all that stuff. That's not the case with Docker. So the idea of Docker is saying that if you're running on a machine like I'm running now, I got Windows 10 on this machine, there's no reason to install another Windows 10. I could just use the Windows 10 that I already have. But let's say I install an application normally on my machine, and I install that in C:\app. Because that is hard-coded. It needs to be in C:\app. But then I need to run 2 of them, like UAT or dev or whatever it is. So I can't, because I cannot install the same app twice in the same folder. So what Docker is doing, and it's not something that Docker invented, it's actually something that goes all the way back to NetBSD. It was called jails initially, where think of it as when you're running something like an app, it has an interface to the world. So it can see a disk, it can see network and other things. So what if you insert like an abstraction layer? So when the application thinks that it's accessing C:\app, but in reality it's accessing a folder sitting somewhere else. So if you run the same thing again, it still thinks that it's accessing C:\app, but then it's actually looking at something in a completely different place. Same thing with the registry in Windows and the network and other resources, that the program thinks it's running against the true system, but all calls, all addresses are kind of redirected. That's the concept of the original concept in NetBSD called jails, and then that's the basic concept of Docker. So instead of requiring that everything is configurable and everything points to the right direction, it's isolated. So one thing that's happening in the background here now is that my container is getting its own network interface. So it's getting an IP address, even though it's just sitting on my machine, because my machine only have one port 80. So only one application can expose a web server on port 80. But if my machine suddenly have multiple IP addresses, and the IP address is actually that abstraction layer, then each container can expose its own port 80. The actual containers, now we talked about where it actually ran inside the container and the abstraction layers around the container. But what's actually in the container is also pretty cool, because even though a container is, when you look at it, at some point it's just a big blob of a lot of data, it's actually built up of layers. And here's a simplified layout saying that there's a layer for Windows server core. Server core is kind of the stripped down server. There's a layer for .NET and framework and stuff like that. There's a layer for the SQL Server. There's a layer for Business Central Worldwide, and then there's a layer for Business Central Local. So the container is built up of all these layers. A single layer can be just a config file. That's all that might be in a layer, or a single layer can be the entire Windows Server stack. So what actually happened over here, this is pretty cool, is that the BC container helper starts looking and say, okay, let's see where we're at. Oh, stop scrolling by. Huh. See if we can, so much is happening now. So we can see that it's actually, oh, now you guys are laughing at me here. So it's grabbing basically a generic Windows image based on the version of my computer. And the pretty cool thing is that 19042.572, that is the Windows 10 20H2 version of Windows 10 that just came out the other day. But already now it's pulling the right image, because if we want to achieve, let's see if we can, if we want to do this where Docker is just sitting on a thin, on using the same operating system, what we're running inside the Docker image is expecting a certain version. So if we're not running the same Windows inside the Docker, then it cannot just use the Windows we have. So what's happening is that it's grabbing that generic image, then it's going out and grabbing all the bits from Business Central, somewhere up here. So where are we at? That we need that specific version of the sandbox. So in BC Container Helper lingo, this is called artifacts. So we're grabbing the right version of BC, and then we're adding those layers together and building a custom image that matches my machine and the version we have selected. And we can see here that it looks like it's already ready to go. So let's do http yt/bc. Was that the name? This looks pretty good. Here is a Business Central. While that loads, let's just grab this one. So the other question, it is still loading in background. So let's talk a minute about Docker. So I'm running Windows 10 here. I'm running Docker Desktop for Windows. And right now, I think I'm actually running the latest version. Sometimes you don't want to try out the latest version right away because this can be unstable. But latest version right now is working great, also on the latest version of Windows. So Docker Desktop for Windows, Google it, download it, install it on a Windows 10 machine, works great. You need the Pro version, so there's our BC we just installed. One thing that's important is that after you install it, you'll get like the little whale with the container logo on, and you see it says switch to Linux containers. So depending on the mood of the installer, you might need to, if it says switch to Windows containers, you need to do that first. Otherwise, it won't work. And another thing you need after installing the Docker for desktop is you need the BC Container Helper or Nav Container Helper. It's kind of the same. The module changed name. Since I have tons of stuff installed that uses the nav container helper. That's what I'm using. The way to do it is quite simple. You do go and say install module nav container helper, or BC container helper if you're a brand new one, and it will install. Come on, there we go. And if I do get module, we can see that I have that one installed. So that's what you need. You need the Docker. If you're running on a server, you can go with the fancy Docker. If you're just like me running on a Windows 10 Pro, you can go with the desktop. Works great. So you need Docker desktop and you need nav container helper. Let's take a quick look at what else did it do for us. So I was trying to keep it up here. So we had a generic Windows image. We grabbed artifacts for the version that we wanted. And just to be clear, I kind of cheated here because I did one of these before I started the video. So I didn't want to watch the video of downloading. So everything was already downloaded. Otherwise, it takes a bit longer than it did here because it needs to download. So now it's building the container and configuring the container, and you can see it sets up the network. One thing that's kind of beware. Well, when we were still able to go out and connect to other Wi-Fi's and so on, sometimes Docker could get confused if the IP address of your host, meaning the PC's, changed. So sometimes you needed to shut down your Docker image before you went to another network and then start them from there. And it's just beware that can cause issues. So we can see that we get a host name. Host name is YT. So I can go and say ping YT, has a IP address like it is a server, but I think I can do route.print, not just route print. So we can see that I get a that's you know what, I'm not going to try to explain that because that takes way too long. But we get network interfaces for this. What else has happened is that you can see that we can download the L language for this specific version. So there's also an port 8080 web server. So this one is running in the, so it chose to run it in process, not as a Hyper-V. So one of the questions were, should you run as in process or in Hyper-V? So in this case, I'd let nav container helper decide, and it decided that it had an image that matched the operating system's version of my machine. So it can just run it in process, meaning that memory is, all my memory is available. Otherwise, if you're running in a VM, you allocate memory for the VM. What I was talking about, and now I totally derailed myself, is that we get the network name, and we get the network name because BC Container Helper will actually add the IP address to my host file. So you can see I have a BC14 and BC17 and BC165, 16.5. I have one just called BC. So I have multiple containers running in case I need it. So now we can see that if I do Docker, let's make this even bigger. So if I do Docker, come on, Docker PS, I get this. We get a long line, but what we can see is that right now I have a container running called YT. But one thing that's important to think about is that this container is, even though it has elements of Windows running, it's just like it's a headless Windows. So there's no, I cannot do a remote desktop to go to YT. This will not work for multiple reasons. One is that we can see here that port 80, 443, 1433, that's SQL, and then the ports for Business Central, that's the only thing that's open. But there is no desktop. What we can do is that the container helper has a, so if I go and look at my machine, we can see that I got some, not there, but there's stuff on my machine, right? But if I do enter BC container name YT, we can see that now I'm in the run folder of C. But there is no run folder on my machine. So now we're in this abstraction where we're actually pointing to somewhere else. I can go out and look at the root and have a total different set of files. If I go to run and we can see that there are some files here. If I exit out of this now, and then I go into oops, sorry, I'll type somewhere else. On my machine, I go into program data and nav container helper and into extensions. We can see that I now have a folder called YT here. And in here, there's a folder called my. And there are great counting skills, Eric. There are 5 files in this one. So if I go back and see enter BC container name YT, and look at come on, you can do this. We can see that the same 5 files are here. So this folder is actually mapped to this folder, which answers another interesting, often asked question is, how do I get files in and out? So there's a map folder here, which is one way of doing it. What we also get here is, you can see that the AOL language file for the Visual Studio Code installer here, the certificates. But if we went back out here, we can see that there's also a folder now called original-17. So original 17.7922, I think was the version. So if we look at this, here is the entire source code of the base app, which is very convenient. I got a lot of questions on my how to modify a standard report. Where did I get the report from? I got it from right here. And the reason I have this is because we added the include AL statement up here. So that's pretty nice. Anyway, when I'm done with this, I can go and say remove nav container name YT, and the container is removed. The host files is cleaned up. and you can see that it's removing the YC folder here. So now it's gone. Whatever I just created is gone. If I go back to my browser here, where it's still sitting, then please wait while the connection is restored. It shouldn't take long. It will probably take long because that server doesn't exist anymore. I just deleted it. So you can do tons of very cool things with Docker, and you can create your own images and add your own things and build that and stuff like that. I don't really do that. What I need is that I need a Business Central. Either I have a couple of images that are kind of living for a long time. Others, you know, I create the image, I use it, I delete it again. And I just need a Business Central because I need it to do the work I do. So I actually use the wizard if I need to create a new script, because it's actually just way easier to use the wizard, get a script, and then I store a script in a folder so I can always call it. In some of my pipeline builds, it will actually just take that script and execute it to get the container I need for a build. So I think that's let me check the timer. Yeah, that's way more than I wanted to say about Docker. So hopefully that answers a lot of the Docker questions I've been getting. If not, you know, the comments are down below. Put your questions down there. And here's a revelation. If you know the answer to a question posted, you should post the answer also. I'll gladly post all the answers I can. But I love it when you guys also answer questions under my videos. That's freaking awesome. Well, remember to subscribe while you're down there, and until next time, have a wonderful day.